No.
Okay.
All right, guys. First of all, thank God Aaron Rodgers is not a Jet right now, and hopefully he never becomes a Jet. And also for time purposes, we're going to cut the smarky BS that I usually do here and get into it. Embrace the madness. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan. It is my favorite time of year. It is the most wonderful time of year.
I'm Anthony Strait, and unfortunately, we missed out on the big dance, but we did score a big win in NIT, so Bold Pride, baby. That's what I say.
We'll hear more about Hofstra in a little while, but welcome to the NCAA Tournament 2023 bracket preview right here, right now. So not only will we give you a region-by-region look at one seeds and their path to the Final Four, bracket busters, and top matchups to look for in week one, we will also give you a guide of how not to do your bracket when we predict our Final Four. And I'm so goddamn glad we don't have to hear the words quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4. Done.
You and Jay Billis both.
All right. But first, so we'll talk tournament, but first we're going to go to different ends of the state of New York to open and close. But first, let's drive upstate. After a loss last Wednesday in the ACC tournament, Coach Jim Boeheim called it a career, stepping down as Syracuse head coach. And Adrian Autry, yeah, that's exactly what I said, became the new head coach of the Syracuse Orange. 1,116 wins, 35 tournament appearances, 10 regular season conference titles, 5 ACC titles, 5 Final Fours, 1 championship, and 1 goddamn permanent scowl on his face no matter what question you ask him. The Orange is on to a new chapter, and I'm going to guess Jim Boeheim is on to a new career that is probably not in media. Jay, how will you remember the Hall of Fame coach for 47 seasons?
You know, think about this, guys. Boeheim's entire adult life is all Syracuse. The last time he didn't play or work for the university, spring semester of his senior year in high school, 61 years ago. He was a walk-on as a freshman in 1962. He graduated in 66, immediately took a paying job as a golf coach and an unpaid job as a part-time assistant basketball coach. And aside from a few games with the Scranton Miners of the old Eastern Professional Basketball League, he never worked anywhere else or for anyone else. Became a full-time paid assistant coach in 1969. And when Roy Danforth left for Tulane in 1976, Boeheim became Syracuse's head coach. He ran the program for those 47 seasons, 1,116 wins. That's all-time active winningest coach against only 440 losses, a 71.7% winning percentage. As Rabbi mentioned, 35 trips to the NCAA tournament, those 5 Final Four appearances, the 03 national title on the back of Carmelo Anthony. Was one of the pioneering coaches of the Big East, helping make it into a power conference. And he became a Hall of Famer in 2005, became synonymous with the 2-3 zone, which his teams played exclusively, even when it was probably no longer wise to keep doing so. Boeheim used to love to tease us and say, maybe I'll work in a little more man-to-man, but he almost never followed through. That 2-3 matchup zone was kind of an offshoot of the old amoeba defense that the late Jerry Tarkanian used to run at UNLV. And it was a style of defense that kind of fit Boeheim's personality because it was flexible, allowing him to observe the game as it went along and tweak the scheme accordingly. And he's arguably the greatest zone defense coach in the history of college basketball. Was it time to go? I mean, the Orange haven't just been mediocre to bad over the last few seasons. This once proud program had kind of become irrelevant. Just 2 seasons of 20-plus wins in the last 9 years. And their last 2 runs to the Sweet 16 kind of had more of a mid-major vibe than the high major vibe we're used to associating with Syracuse. This year's team missed the postseason for the 2nd straight year after not having done so at any previous point in Boeheim's time at the helm. His sons are out of eligibility, posted his first losing record last season. I mean, maybe it was time. He's 78 years old after all. And while it may not be how he wanted to go out, but I mean, think about it, guys. I mean, was he ever really going to go willingly? I mean, when you look back on it, and I was looking back on it as I was reading all the, the stories of his retiring, while abandoning the Big East for the ACC to chase the almighty college football dollar, may not have been a great thing for Boston College or Pittsburgh. It was even worse for Syracuse, who along with Georgetown, Villanova, and St. John's were the beasts of the Big East. In the ACC, they were interlopers from up north, carpetbaggers who didn't really belong. I mean, even when Boeheim's teams were good, this was never his conference and was never going to be his conference. And it made a guy who was curmudgeonly to begin with ever more so. And as awkward as that post-game conference after the loss to Wake Forest in the ACC tournament was, with Boeheim tap dancing around whether or not he would continue coaching with the whole, this is up to the university and you're talking to the run guy. I mean, the press release the school put out a few hours later basically saying, today as his 47th season coaching his alma mater comes to an end, so too does his storied career at Syracuse University. That was just as awkward. I mean, they chose to be dismissive instead of complimentary of the man whose service put the school on the college basketball map and kept the 30,000 seat Carrier Dome filled for those 47 years. You know, as someone who has called a college basketball game from the floor of that arena, I did play-by-play for St. John's University campus radio, and the Syracuse trip was mine for 4 years. I got an up-close view of Coach Boeheim both on that floor and in the media rooms afterwards. I wish the ending of this era could have gone better. I wish he could have bowed out gracefully, retiring on his own, instead of effectively making Syracuse retire him. You know, but that's not who Jim Boeheim is. So I guess it went the only way it could.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk about that in a second. Anthony, I know he's been coaching longer than we've been alive, but the man definitely has a lot of different tendencies in there and is pretty much a unique coach in his own right.
Yeah, you think about the stubbornness in the way out. It's pretty much personified his personality as far as dealing with the press. He was very aloof. Had no problem coasting more than Stone Cold Steve Austin and giving post-game presser. But that's just the way he was. But it didn't take away from what he did as a head coach. I mean, and here's a story. The only time I had a chance to visit the Syracuse campus was on a college trip back in 2001. And I did have a chance to actually briefly meet Coach Boeheim as he was on his way to practice. It was a January trip, so obviously it was mid-season. And he was nice enough to say hi to myself and some of the people that was visiting the campus on a college on a campus trip. Saw the Carrier Dome for the first time, which would be the only time because I ended up going to school elsewhere my first year and eventually my way to Hofstra. But you think about he coached 49 different NBA players, and I think back to 1996 with John Wallace and getting into the Final Four when it was at the Meadowlands Arena. They obviously with Carmelo Anthony in 2003 and finally winning it all. But you look at it like this too. He was also part of Team USA coaching staff for 3 gold medal teams. So him and Mike Krzyzewski was able to develop a really good close relationship to this day. But you think about, some of the days, and Jay, you nailed it, the 2-3 zone, the fact that he was pretty much as part of the Syracuse face, the campus is anything. And it's also complicated too, because there was a lot of things that he had dealt with off the basketball court. Particularly, there was an incident where he was involved in an accident that unfortunately did claim the life of someone. And there was allegations that happened on campus several years back. But then on the flip side, Boeheim was a big proponent of cancer research, raising a lot of money. Him himself going through a bout with prostate cancer. So it's like when you think of Jim Boeheim, you think of a complicated legacy, because there was some of the things that happened off the court. There was the aloof personality that may have rubbed some people the wrong way. Even on his way out, it was pretty much he went out kicking and screaming as much as you would think. But then you think about what he was able to do with that program. And yes, moving from the Big East to the ACC turned out to be a disaster to Syracuse. Because I think about when they had the ACC tournament here in the Barclays Center, it was almost like to pacify Jim Boeheim to shut him up. But literally, that tournament was not in place. It belonged in Greensboro for all intents and purposes. But like I
It
said,
was
Boeheim,
never, by the way, it was
basketball,
never to pacify him up. It was to get the market to New York City, which is one of the reasons why all of this stuff began with. And I know it's always a football thing, but there's a reason why the Big Ten went for Rutgers and why Syracuse and other teams went to the ACC. The New York market has always been an untapped market for college sports, and it will never be left alone that way.
yeah. But when you
And
look at
that's
like,
unfortunate.
It is, but it is what it is.
It's unfortunate, but this is really a professional town, so it's really hard as a college. If you're not St. John's, who is really the main college team in the city, that could tap into that kind of market that you see like the Big Ten, the ACC is trying to get. But this has always been a Big East town, so St. John's being so synonymous with that conference and being in the heart of the city, I think that's what makes it stand out. But getting back to Jim Boeheim, I just think he had a phenomenal career. Over how many years?
47
years with the program. You think about over 1,000 wins, the national championship, 35 NCAA tournament appearances, Hall of Famer. I mean, I wish he had been able to go out with a little bit of a better swan song than just kind of being pushed out the door. But this was a typical Jim Boeheim, if there ever was an exit.
So you compare this to the I know Jay is going to be biased to get this, but you compare this to the Coach K victory lap that he took last year, and he was respected by a lot of people, got to go out on his own terms, and really he adapted with the times. When he was never really a one and done person, he started bringing in one and dones and won a title with one and dones. And I'm going to say the nice things about Jim Boeheim right now. He is a guy who started in the Ford administration and leaves during probably the most famous Syracuse alums administration, Joe Biden. So that's how many administrations he has been around. He is, again, Anthony mentioned all the work he's done with cancer research, the fact that the man is a competitor. This is all, by the way, from an article called The Complicated Legacy, ironically enough, of Jim Boeheim in Syracuse, written by Keith Thamel for ESPN.com. But he mentioned his first game, he was up by 1 against Harvard, and then he kept his players in and won by 20. And it just shows that Jim Boeheim is a competitor. That is the type of man that he will always be known as. And then you take a look at some of the history of the people that played through there. Some of the best college players of all time: Derek Coleman, Pearl Washington, John Wallace, and of course, Carmelo Anthony, who probably had one of the best one and done college careers of all time, winning a title with Syracuse as a 3 seed back in 2003. Jim Boeheim is synonymous with some of the most winningest basketball around. He used to be a coach who just was like, why are you always in the zone? And then later on in the years during the tournament, all of a sudden nobody could figure out the zone because it was such a unique setup. Mm-hmm. That being said, Jim Boeheim is complicated for many reasons, and just one of them. We talked about how the fact that the man was just going out on the wrong terms. The man was through 2 investigations, one in 1992, one in 2015. The school said in 2015 that Boeheim needed to retire in 3 years. He retired in 8 years. The school did look the other way, as Boeheim was just a guy who got around rules sometimes. And of course, the man could never really adapt to what I guess would mean legal cheating with NIL. And is always one of the people that was just complaining about NIL all the time. In fact, I think complaining in terms of Pittsburgh, who is currently in the ACC, in the NCAA tournament going on right now. Jim Boeheim is a winner. Jim Boeheim is going to be known as one of the most decorated college basketball coaches in history. But you do have to realize that Jim Boeheim is going to always be a complicated figure. He will never be on the level of the Dean Smiths and Mike and Coach K's of the world. He did leave a legacy at Syracuse, but unfortunately, people have to go on the chord that's not always their own. Not a lot of people get to write their own ending, unfortunately. Nope. But I think, again, as Jay said, Jim Boeheim's going to go. Jim Boeheim is going to go kicking and screaming in his own way out of the door. And it's very interesting how he did it. All right.
It's typical.
It's very typical. All right, let's move on to the 68, Southeast
67.
Missouri State 67 teams that have actually made it into the bracket and are still in the bracket. We're going to go region by region, starting in the South, and we're going to go overall number one seeds. We'll go with number one overall seed Alabama. Overall number one seed Alabama.
Sounds
Coach
weird,
Nate
right?
Oates, Coach Nate Oates had this properly run, not troublesome organization at all. We'll leave that stuff for another time. I had something much worse for that line, by the way.
Please.
Not only
No, not tonight.
I had something
Right.
much worse. By the way, not only the first overall number one seed for the Crimson Tide, by God, in all that is holy and Nick Saban. It's the first ever number one seed for Alabama basketball ever. Joining them in this region is 2 seed and Pac-12 champs, Pac-12 tourney champs, Arizona, 3 seed and 2021 national champions, Baylor, and then the champs of the tourney before that in 2019, 4 seed Virginia. We're going to talk path for the number one seeds, bracket buster each region, matchup to watch. Let's go, Jay. We'll start with the path of the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, like I know that the number one overall seed usually gets the easiest road to the Final Four, and I say that in those air quotes because easy is not really a word to be used in this tournament, but you guys know what I mean. And each of the three other high seeds in this bracket all have issues that don't give me confidence that they can stop a Tide team that scores north of 80 points per game, is top 20 in both top 20 in offensive efficiency, and number 3 in defensive efficiency from rolling. Bama gets to play their opening round games in Birmingham, which should be a friendly environment. And I have no doubt they'll get past whatever 16 seed they wind up playing, which Rabbi has now been determined.
Texas A&M Corpus Christi.
There we go. Okay. And while both Maryland or West Virginia, middle of the pack teams in their respective conferences, could give, Bama a bit of a test, both are very physical teams. I still see the Tide led by SEC Player of the Year forward Brandon Roy, 19.6 points, 8.
Brandon Miller,
sorry. Wow,
Boy.
that's a Freudian slip from
That
Wade.
is a
Brandon Miller, 19.6 points per game, 8.3 boards, shoots it for them 40% from on 3. Along with a solid backcourt led by senior Javon Quinterly and junior Mark Sears. I see them coming out of that part of the region regardless. What'll be interesting to see is how the bottom half of their part of the region plays out, because both number 4 seed Virginia and number 5 seed San Diego State could get bounced on day one. Number 12 seed College of Charleston and 13 seed Furman are no joke. Charleston is a 31 team. Rabbi, I know how much you love 30-win teams that score the basketball at a little under 81 points per game. There's 6 scorers ranging between 9 points and 12.3 points per game. They crash the boards, pulling down a little over 40 rebounds per game. And they're balanced on both ends. 69th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 72nd in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. So if they can speed up a San Diego State team that prefers to play half court, they're 240th in the nation in possessions per 40 minutes. And grind things out, this could be an upset. Furman, top 35 in the nation in adjusted offensive efficiency, top 515 in effective field goal percentage, defense per KenPom. They rely heavily on the 3, 27 a game. They take care of the ball, though. They guard the opposing three-point line and limit second chance opportunities. They get hot from beyond the arc. You got a blueprint that could spark a first-round upset against a UVA team that, to put it politely, guys, has struggled on offense. We all know that Tony Bennett's pack line defense will keep them in games, but I'm concerned about their inability to score of late. Bottom half of the region, I think 11 seeded North Carolina State's excellent backcourt of Taquavian Smith and Jarkel Joyner, both of whom averaged 17 points per game, could give number 6 Creighton a fight. But I think the Blue Jays played better here than they did in their Big East semifinal loss to Xavier, and a team with 5 players averaging at least 11.9 points per game and was number 1 in defensive efficiency in the conference, led by Defensive Player of the Year Ryan Kalkbrenner, who leads the team with 65 blocks in the nation in field goal percentage at a little over 71%, has enough to advance to face the 3 seed Baylor. Number 2 in adjusted offensive efficiency per KenPom, led by freshman sensation Keontae George at 16 a game. Kid's electric. I've enjoyed watching him play this year in Big 12 conference play. And the 2 of the best snipers in the country back him up in LJ Cryer and Adam Flagler, both of whom knock down threes at better than 41%. Baylor being 90th in Ken Palm's defensive efficiency ratings could be an issue, though Creighton is not a heavyweight offensive team compared to Baylor anyway. Either way, while Creighton and Baylor could be somewhat of a challenge, I do like Arizona to get out of their half of the region, though the health of point guard Kurt Krista, who keeps seeming to get hurt in March, guys. He's dealing with a shoulder issue this year after an ankle injury last year. It gives me a little bit of a pause. However, with Azuolas Tubelis, their versatile 6'11" forward, averages near double-double, 19.8 points, 9-1 boards, while shooting 58.6 from the floor and a little over, and knocking down triples at 1 out of every 3. He leads the way. I honestly don't see anyone short of Bama stopping the Wildcats, which I think they will.
I think it's a weak region, by the way. I actually do think it's more of a weak region. I do think Arizona is a gutsy team, and I think that's going to be something that'll be very interesting to see. And also a more experienced team than this Alabama team. They made it 2 years ago to the Sweet 16, but that team has a lot of turnover. They're a team that definitely has taken advantage of all of the new college basketball rules. Again, Alabama being more successful in basketball than football still should shock a lot of other people.
No, Nate Oates has very, under the radar.
Nate Oates has done a very
good job building this program up. And like you said, Rob, it gets lost in the, all the talk about Nick Saban and college and the football team down there. They are a legit overall #1 seed this year.
They're a legit overall #1 seed. There are issues with Nate Oates that I have that we will not talk about right now, but but they've done a very good job this year and are deserving of where they are. All right, Anthony, in this region, you're looking at the 12 seed of the South of the CAA tournament, not regular season. That would be Hofstra.
Yeah, it has a thing too about Charleston, the fact that even if they didn't win the conference tournament, they had a good argument to be at large bid because they had the most wins in the country with 31, 16-2 in the Colonial Athletic Conference, 31-3 record overall. Like Pat Kelsey, the head coach, took over a team that was under 500 2 years ago, and it's turned it into a very, very scary 12 seed in that region. When you think about the fact that Charleston does something that is almost contagious and is almost unstoppable in March. They can shoot, and they're one of the more balanced teams going into the tournament. They're 72nd in both offense and defense and efficiency measures, according to Ken Palm. They're the 18th offensive efficiency ranking, along with 14th defensively. So it's not only the fact that they can score, they can defend also. Then you think about the fact that they are top 10 in 3 points made per game. And the fact that they have 9 players have averaged at least 15 minutes per game. They've had 5 players score double-digit points on a number of occasions. And they get a San Diego State team that may not have the offensive firepower to keep up on top of the fact that this 12 seed can actually play defense. And there's one thing we've seen in March over the years that makes a low seed a very scary opponent to deal with. Momentum, the fact that they can shoot from outside, and the fact that they can play very stingy defense. Don't be surprised if this team is in the Sweet 16. When you think about the fact that they also can rebound too. So you got a team that can defend, that can shoot, and had the 17th highest offensive rebounding rate at 35% overall. I mean, this is one of what makes this Cougars team scary is the balance and the fact that they can. Hey, look, it's not a surprise if they beat a 5, which is San Diego State, but if they get to the Sweet 16 next weekend.
Yeah, I will say this, by the way, that is the most combined wins in any first round matchup this year, regular season. San Diego State was 27-6. Charleston was 31-3. Charleston and San Diego State, I think, are both underseeded at their
and I'll say this too. What's going to be interesting if it's the second round matchup is Charleston and Virginia, because this is literally a matchup of contrasting styles when you think about Virginia being very much half court. And
any style is a contrast to Virginia.
and Charleston being a very up-tempo team, it'll be very interesting to see which team can actually play their style, their brand of basketball for 40 minutes.
Charleston is the key. Virginia, by the way, is the key to sleep apnea. If you want to fix that, you just go right ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So that matchup is a 3:10 matchup on Thursday. Very under the radar matchup. Another under the radar matchup is a game that will tip off at 10:40 local time on Thursday afternoon. A 1:40 tip in the East. It's in Sacramento. It's the 7-seed Missouri versus the 10-seed Utah State. Speaking of Mountain West teams, Utah State was the consensus number 2 team in the Mountain West this year and lost in the Mountain West tournament final to San Diego State. So a 10 seed is a little, I think, underseeded, but the Mountain West did not get a win last year in the NCAA tournament. So they're not going to get as much respect, although they did get 4 teams into this year's dance. So Utah State is a team that has been around all of the time. They're actually the betting favorites in this game. They have Max Shulga and Stephen Ashworth, who is a 16.3 point, 3.2 rebound, 4.5 assist player this year. And they're 13th in offensive efficiency. And by the way, 19th in net, 18th in Ken Palm. They are a beast to deal with, and they will score, and they will score quickly. Missouri is also very offensively efficient. They're 9th in the nation, and they have a good first-year head coach in Dennis Gates. This team was not supposed to be this good this year. They ended up being the 4 seed in the SEC tournament, or the 4th seed this year in the regular season, and ended up beating a Tennessee team and really ran them out of the gym in their SEC quarterfinal. They did end up losing to Alabama in the semifinals of the SEC. And Missouri probably has a shelf life of the round after against Arizona, but this is a very good 7-10 matchup. The 7-10 matchups across the board are excellent.
Yeah,
8-9
really
matchups
good.
are interesting, but I think you have to look at the 7-10s. And I think either one of these teams will give Arizona a good look in a second round matchup. But if you're looking for a very good first day matchup that is going to come down to the final buzzer, this is it. And I'm really excited to see this matchup, even though that might have maybe 12 people in good old Sacramento watching at 10:40 in the morning on a Thursday. All right. We're going to move away from the South, and we're going to move on. Actually, I'm sorry. We're going to move away from, we're going to move away from the South and on to the Midwest. I wrote this one.
Yes.
Onwards to the Midwest region at overall number 2 seed, which surprisingly went to American Conference regular season champ Houston. Despite a finals tournament loss, which they did without first-team All-American Marcus Sasser in the lineup, Houston did get their first number 1 seed since 1983. Did not realize that 84 team was a 2 seed. They got a path that had them stay in the Midwest and not be shipped out west. We'll talk about Kansas in just a little bit. In-state rival Texas. I don't really know if that's a rivalry, but they were the Big 12 tournament champ. They're the 2. 3-seeded Big East runner-up, both in the regular season of the conference tournament in Xavier. That's 3. And the home of the Fighting Mike Woodsons, Indiana. All right, Jed, this is the most talented Houston team in, our lifetimes at least, since Phi Slamma Jamma. What's Houston's path to the Final Four in Houston?
This region intrigues me. Houston has definite Final Four potential, but I think their chances rise or fall on the availability and overall health of AAC Player of the Year and leading scorer at 17 points per game, guard Marcus Sasser, who suffered a groin injury in the conference semis against Cincinnati and did not play in that conference final loss to Memphis. He warmed up prior to the game, but he did not go. The question is, how close was he to being able to go in that game? And was he held out so he'd be fully ready for the NCAAs? Look, backcourt mate Jamal Sheed and power forward Jaras Wallace can carry the Cougars through their first round matchup with Northern Kentucky. But if Sasser cannot go or is less than 100%, then Kelvin Sampson's squad might be in trouble, as he's their only true bucket getter, though their ability to guard and get on the offensive glass, they rebound 37% of their missed shots, should still keep them in games. They'll just have to win the hard way. That being said, this is as well-rounded a squad as Sampson has ever had at Houston. Top 10 in both adjusted offensive and defensive efficiencies per KenPom. On defense, they hold opponents to about a 42% effective field goal percentage and 28% from beyond the arc. per Ken Palm. And on offense, they move the ball well with all 5 starters averaging double figures, led by Sasser and Sheed. Walker's the X factor for Houston. 6'8" AAC freshman of the year, averaged nearly 11 points and 7 boards while shooting above 35% from beyond the arc. His size and athleticism can be a game changer. I think they get past either Auburn, who can defend, top 30 in defensive efficiency numbers, but struggles to score, and that's about as an understatement as I can make. 133rd in the nation in offensive rating and 122nd in points per game in the nation per Warren Nolan. I also think they can get past Iowa, who's led by Chris Murray, the only D1 player to average 20 points, 8 boards with more than 63s. Iowa can light it up on offense. They led the Big Ten in scoring each of the last 5 seasons, and they ranked 3rd in adjusted offensive tempo by Ken Palm, but they can't shut anyone down on defense. They're last in the Big Ten in scoring defense and field goal percentage. Since those are so one-dimensional teams in one way or another, I think maybe even without Sasser, Houston should be able to get past either one of them. No disrespect to Trace Jackson Davis, who I have enjoyed watching his entire career at Indiana. And number 4 Indiana, or, ACC player of the year Isaiah Wong, and number 5 Miami, both of whom could be upset in the first round. If Sasser's healthy by this round, I don't think either one of those teams stand a chance of stopping them. Houston advances to come out of their half. Bottom half of the region is strong, as Rabbi noted. Number 3 Xavier, the second best team in the Big East all season, and an underseeded number 7 Texas A&M, second best team in the regular season out of the SEC, and has some very interesting matchups, which my colleagues here will get into. But when it's all said and done, I fully expect the number 2 seeded Texas Longhorns to be standing in the way of the Cougars getting to the Final Four. Forward Timmy Allen, who missed the Big 12 title game, is expected to be ready to go. The Horns blew out Kansas by 20 without him. Texas is very tough defensively, has guards and wings who can score from all 3 levels. I talked about Marcus Carr and Sir Jabari Smith on our last show. They comprise one of the best backcourts in the country. Each had 17 against Kansas. Forward Dylan Deese, who pounded the Jayhawks front court for 18. Texas is the highest ranked number 2 seed for a reason, and the Cougars will have to get through them in order to ensure that they're going home for the right reason.
They can still watch the Final Four, by the way.
I said the right reason.
By the way, Chris, if Chris Murray sounds familiar, it is Keegan Murray's actually.
Yes,
it is
his twin
Keegan
brother.
Murray's brother,
Yep.
and 3rd team All-American this year. So, by the way, if Houston plays Auburn in the second round, that game will be in Birmingham. So that could be a very interesting
home game for
de facto home game
Auburn.
for Auburn, which don't think a number 1 seed should have to go through, but that's neither there. You try to make a bracket.
Hey.
All right, you try to make a bracket. Anthony, we saw a pretty good Penn State basketball and Alabama basketball. This is a very weird time warp here,
Right?
But Penn State basketball as the 10 seed, they're scary.
Yeah, by the way, I got a backtrack on that. You never associate Birmingham and Auburn in the same sentence, all right?
They're going to travel.
Hey,
It's a neutral
right.
site.
Birmingham is UAB territory.
It is UAB territory, but it's not like Auburn people aren't going to travel to Birmingham. That's going to be a very pro-Auburn crowd.
To be fair, it's Birmingham. It's not like it's Tuscaloosa. Come on now.
Yeah, big difference.
Hey, I have family down there, so I gotta speak for my kinfolk.
There you go. All right.
But
I see
when
you.
we think of, but when we talk about Penn State, we obviously, and Rabbi just mentioned, when we think of Penn State and Alabama, we're thinking about football, not exactly the hardwood. But Penn State, because of a 10-10 conference record, spent a lot of time on a bubble, and there's a lot of talk of quad 1 and quad 2, and yes, thank God we're past that. But a great semi-Cinderella one all the way to the Big Ten Conference Championship game, and a comeback that came up just short against a 1-1 season Purdue. Yeah, got Penn State into the tournament as a 10 seed. They think about this after weeks of wins over Northwestern, Maryland, Illinois, and Indiana, kind of helped their cause to get into the tournament. They're led by Jalen Pickett. Obviously, the future NBA draft pick and a walking triple-double
Also a
if there
first
ever
team
is
All-American, by the way.
Yes, and first team All-American. Thank you for throwing that one in too. 18 points a game, 7.4 rebounds, 6 assists a game, and the fact that he is surrounded by a medley of outside shooters that makes him even more dangerous. The fact that he has the potential to legitimately take over a game, like Kemba Walker or Steph Curry doing their college's tournament runs, where you saw them literally step into the spotlight. But then you look at it like this: the offensive efficiency is 17th overall. Where they struggle is on the defensive side. The only the defensive rank is 101, and they don't. And one of the biggest issues is they do lack size. However, the full-side matchup, A&M, is a very guard-heavy offense that doesn't exactly exploit their weaknesses. So one of the things I am looking at is how is A&M going to defend Pickett, because they spend too much energy on him. That does leave out the outside shooters, and Pickett is a great passer and can find the open man. If you leave him one-on-one, he could go for 30 points easily. But what makes Penn State dangerous is the fact that because of this run to the Big Ten championship game, and the fact that they got some quality wins along the way, they have momentum going into a tournament. They have that belief, that confidence that they didn't have maybe 3 weeks ago, even a month ago, when they were pretty much on the bubble and seeing a season with aspirations get into the tournament kind of going downhill. This is the first time in the tournament, by the way, since 2011, since the first year that the tournament expanded to 68 teams. So this has been a long time coming for the Nittany Lions, the basketball program anyway. But it's gonna be interesting to see, because like we've seen in March Madness, they have that one player who can go off and make Penn State a very dangerous out, either in the first or even in the second round.
Teams like that are always dangerous to pick, because they can go one of two ways. They can either be really tired from having to exalt all that energy and playing 4 games in 4 days, or exactly how you said, Anthony, momentum and the belief that they could do this. So they'll play in Des Moines on Thursday. Now, I'm very interested in that matchup, because you very rarely get to see an SEC tournament runner-up and a Big Ten tournament runner-up play in the opening week. That's very rare. But if A&M does come out of there, now, yes, they are probably a little underseeded as a 7, but their non-conference schedule was horrid, and it does show that you do need to kind of schedule good in the beginning of the year, because that's how you get respect in the committee. Also, Buzz Williams really complained about the committee last year, and even though this is his 9th trip to the NCAA tournament, the committee doesn't forgive and the committee doesn't forget. So you take that 7 seed.
Especially when the guy running the committee this year has actually played in a Final Four.
That is correct. But Texas, we talked about that. By the way, they have to face a Colgate team in the first round who has 5 people on that team who average double digits. It's not your typical 15. But Texas has so many good offensive players: Marcus Carson, Jabari Rice, Timmy Allen, Dylan Daisu. That team is a dangerous team. But Texas and Texas A&M in the tournament, I know they're not playing on the football field. Southwest Conference, Big 8 territory here. You are talking history that kind of got a little fucked up when A&M moved over to the SEC, and will probably never be the same even when Texas moves over to the SEC in a few years.
Oh yeah, because A&M moved to the SEC so they could be the only Texas team in the SEC.
Yeah, well, A&M also
to get away from the Longhorns.
Yeah, so they'll never ever be the same again. But if Texas A&M can win that first round matchup and then find themselves in a matchup with Texas, it will be very interesting to me, because of the history, because of how A&M has played, especially towards the later part of the season. Again, their SEC record has been pretty good. They're a 25-9 team this year going into the field. But the one thing I always I'm always interested in going into this thing, and yes, I think A&M and Texas would be a wonderful game. But again, not many 2 seeds who are the number 5 overall seed in the tournament have a coach who is coaching for his job. And Rodney Terry doesn't at least get to the Sweet 16. Texas might actually try to look for a name as their coach. And it just shocks me that a guy who had to take over in a tough situation, Chris Beard, who is now the coach at Ole Miss, his current charges did get dropped of his domestic abuse cases. But when you have to replace a guy who was the guy who really recruited and restocked the Texas shelf pretty quickly, and doing what he did this year, getting Texas to be the unequivocal second best team in the Big 12, and by a lot, they beat Kansas 2 times in a week to get to this spot. And I'm very interested to see Texas's road in this tournament. And
Not just
honestly, their second round matchup,
down.
they did both times. So honestly, Texas's second round matchup, which will probably, I think, be A&M, but could easily be Penn State, honestly, is probably much easier than a possible matchup with an Xavier, Mississippi State, Iowa State pit in the regionals. So I'm very interested in this Midwest region. So we'll see what happens as that regional is in Kansas City. Weird, by the way, that Texas and Texas A&M might have to settle a territorial grudge match in Missouri.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really anything in the cards. Okay, over to the West region. By the way, but Baylor and Houston met in the Final Four a few years ago, and they settled their differences in Indianapolis. So I think if 2 teams in the state play each other, they have to automatically play in that state. That's just the rule I'm going to do. All right, over to the West region, where the regional weekend is in Las Vegas. Ooh, boy, the amount of money that's going to be lost there that weekend. All right. Speaking of teams that lost something this past weekend, let's talk Kansas, the 3rd overall number 1 seed. Their loss really beat down to Texas, cost them the Midwest regional and a chance to be in a regional in Kansas City. Now they find themselves in a West region, which is full of a 2 to 5 seed grouping that is all in the top 11 of the Ken Palm ratings going into the tournament. The 2 seed in the Pac-12 is regular season champ UCLA. The 3 seed of the WCC conference tourney is the 3 seed in the conference in this region is WCC conference tourney champs Gonzaga. Both those teams played their conference tournaments in Vegas. They're bringing out the fans. Very rarely does Kansas possibly lose fans, but this might be the place where they're outnumbered. 4 seed UConn and 5 seed St. Mary's round out the top seeds. By the way, if you want to know the Ken Palm rankings, UCLA 2nd, Gonzaga 8th, UConn 4th, St. Mary's 11th. Kansas, by the way, is 7th. So this is a minefield, if you can say it. I can say it any better myself. I can't even say anything better myself right now. Jay, tell us about the Jayhawks.
Rock chalk, right? Yes. I agree with you, Rabbi. This is by far the toughest region. However, in my humble opinion, the committee got this one wrong, sticking Kansas in the West region. The Jayhawks have the better team sheet compared to the Houston Cougars. Both teams lost their conference tournament final. Jayhawks have better metrics. They have better quad records. And the Jayhawks also have the lesser of the player injury situation, Kevin McCullers versus Marcus Sasser. So to me, the defending champ should have been the Midwest number 1, not the West number 1. Look, Bill Self, and the thing is, the committee also did Kansas 0 favors, putting UCLA as the number 2, Gonzaga as the number 3 in the bottom half of that bracket, as the rabbi just alluded to. Bill Self is expected to be back on the sidelines for the NCAA tournament, and McCullough, who averages 10.7 points and 7.1 rebounds per game, and has been hitting 60% of his shots inside the arc since February 1, on top of being a top 5 defensive player, is expected to be back in the rotation for the Jayhawks. So as long as Big 12 Player of the Year Jalen Wilson, 20 points and 8.4 boards per game, gets his usual amount of help from veteran point guard DeJuan Harris, freshman wing Grady Dick, who's averaging 14 points and shooting at 40% from downtown, and Big 12 most improved player KJ Adam, I don't see any reason for the defending champs to get out of their pod. Whomever they face in the other half of their side of the region, number 4 UConn or number 5 St. Mary's, if that pod goes chalk, and the rabbi will tell you why the if is a legit in a minute, will be a challenge. But I still think Kansas, despite their lack of depth, has enough weapons to get to the Elite Eight. The bottom half of the region with UCLA and Gonzaga is where the danger lies for Kansas. Pac-12 champs would be more of a threat to come out of here if they were at full strength, but they're not. Junior guard Jalen Clark, the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year and the Bruins' third leading scorer, is out for the season with a torn Achilles, which he suffered in the regular season finale against Arizona. And then forward Adam Bona, who leads the team in blocks at 1.7 per game and field goal percentage at a little under 67%, injured his shoulder in the conference semis against Oregon and missed the finals where UCLA lost to Arizona. And his status for the NCAAs is still TBD. I think the Bruins can get past number 15 UNC Asheville and maybe the winner of the number 7 versus number 10 matchup between Northwestern and Boise State. Me personally, I like the Broncos in that one with their top 5 defense that holds opponents to 64 points a game, 31% from 3, and an effective field goal percentage of just 47.3 while making 52% of their shots inside the arc, 37% of their shots beyond it. But UCLA, with just their 3 senior leaders, point guard Tiger Kamba and forward Jaime Jaquez, and Pac-12 Player of the Year, who's the Pac-12 Player of the Year, and David Singleton. But I don't like their chances against whomever comes out of the top half of the group, number 3 Gonzaga or number 6 TCU. TCU needs Mike Miles to be fully back on his game after missing 5 with a knee injury, since the Horned Frogs are one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the nation at 30%. If he's not 100%, and maybe even if he is, I'm just not sure they get past number 3 Gonzaga, who are coming into the NCAAs in their usual postseason form, and frankly, seem to be playing a little pissed off due to the lack of respect they're getting for what folks outside of Spokane felt was an un-Gonzaga-like regular season. They went only 28-5. Had to share the regular season WDCC title with St. Mary's before blowing the Gales out by 26 in the conference final. Senior forward Drew Timme, the WCC Player of the Year, had his usual season, a little under 21 points, a little over 7 boards and 3 assists. And in junior guard Julian Strother, who was second on the Zags in both scoring and rebounding, 15-1, 5.9, and knocked down his team-leading 72 threes at a 42% clip, has been a solid wingman for Timme and comes into the NCAAs averaging 18.3 per game in his last 8. The Zags lead the nation in offensive rating at 128 per Warren Nolan, and they score at 86.5 points per game, also number 1 in the nation. They're number 2 in the nation in effective field goal percentage at 58.5. Granted, their defensive metrics are a little concerning. They're 162nd in the nation in defensive rating at 102.6 per Warren Nolan. But that's still a better than 18-point differential. But their offense more than makes up for it, and it's why I think they'll be the team standing in the way of the Jayhawks becoming the first team to repeat since the Florida Gators in 06 and 07.
The one thing that interests that I actually think is Gonzaga for the first time in a long time is not playing with a chip on their shoulder.
No, they actually are.
They are, but they're not favored in any way, shape, or form to make it to the Final Four, and that could actually be a blessing in disguise because of last year failing in the Sweet 16 and then the royal ass kicking that Baylor gave them 2 years ago. So I'm very interested to see what a relaxed. I know they're playing with a chip on their shoulder, but by the way, does Drew Timme have any more eligibility left after this year? I'm sure he's gonna find it. I'm sure he's gonna find it.
It feels like he's been there for 1,000 years, but he
has been there for 1,000 years, and I don't even know if he got the school record of points. I think he did. All right, Anthony. Yes. Arkansas has made the last 2 Elite Eights, but their seed this time is 8. They can spoil.
Yeah, let me tell you, Arkansas, they have a chance to erase a lot of bad memories this season. In particular, head coach Eric Musselman losing his cool after the end of that SEC tournament quarterfinal loss to A&M, where he had to be restrained by several of his
Arkansas and UCLA.
Postal.
Arkansas and UCLA should not even be anywhere near the same region, because imagine Mick Cronin and Eric Musselman in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
Get ready for the red-faced coaches memes to be all over the internet.
I think it could be the red wedding of college basketball, honestly. It really could.
Yeah, it was definitely a bad look overall, but the Razorbacks, because of all the injuries they suffered this year, a season that started with a lot of expectations really kind of went south in a hurry. Particularly Nick Smith Jr., the NBA prospect and one of the best players, missed all 12 games this season with injury. Then Trayvon Brazil went down with a season-ending ACL injury. So they've had the injury bug absolutely devastated the Razorbacks this season. One of the bright spots was freshman guard Anthony Black stepping up, averaging 12 a game. But it's obviously getting Nick Smith Jr. back healthy. It's one of his last 5 games. He's averaged 24 points a game. And you think about, and the reason why I picked Arkansas is the fact that because of the injuries, it's a team that never really had a chance to play up to its full potential. Now they have an opportunity to do that. But then Anthony Black has a foot injury. So again, the injury bug is kind of plaguing them a little bit going into the tournament. But the reason why I picked them as a sleeper, a possible bracket buster, is that round 2 matchup. And the fact that Arkansas Illinois is a pretty toss-up game as an 8 and 9 seed, as most 8 and 9 seed games are. But I'm looking at that possible matchup against Kansas, and I'm looking at what Kansas team showed up this past weekend, and thinking to myself, Arkansas on a good day, because they can score and because of their ability to attack the basket offensively. Then you think about Kansas being very inconsistent. That leaves the Jayhawks open to getting knocked out before they even get to the Sweet 16, let alone the Elite 8, and when it's a very difficult side of bracket that they ended up on. And here's the thing: when you this is a time when you need to play your best basketball, and you get rewarded for that, as we saw with the other 1 seeds. In the case of Kansas, they're in a situation where they're basically going to be a road team if they go up against a team like UCLA or Gonzaga, because of the close proximity with Vegas and obviously the crowd showing up. But then when you look at what was you going to say?
Well, the good thing is about Kansas will travel. They travel almost anywhere. They will still be there, but they will be outnumbered. It won't be a great outnumbering, but they will be outnumbered. It's rare for Kansas to go to any tournament game where the crowd is not 50-50 at least in their favor, or a little over like 55-45 in their favor.
Yeah. And what I give Arkansas, I give them a puncher's chance against a possible one seed Kansas matchup is the ability to attack the basket. And the fact that Kansas consistency, the fact that they're only 141st on defense, do not have opposing shot blocking to speak of. It kind of plays into Arkansas' strength if they're healthy. Once again, it gets Smith Jr. back, who was would have been a catalyst as far as having a better season. Just a team that had been to the Elite 8 the last 2 years, so the experience is there. Now would be a great time to just kind of be able to put aside what was a season just devastated by injuries and be able to go on a pretty decent run in the tournament. But that when you look, that second round matchup is the one that I'm keeping my eyes on, because I thought Kansas is one of the better teams, and to lay an egg the way they did kind of put the doubt in my head a little bit. Maybe it's one game.
Texas is just a bad matchup for Kansas. Kansas is still Kansas, and they'll have all of their pieces back. But I watched all 3 games against Texas this year. Texas is a bad matchup for them.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of brackets too that is picking Texas out of this leadership because of that very thing you just said, Jay.
The one thing you do have to realize is, and this is the last I'm going to mention it, Kansas had 15 quad 1 wins this year. That is the most of any team ever since the quad system came out, and they only have 2 starters back from the national championship. So, okay, so I'm actually going to cheat here and go with an entire pod as my matchup to watch, because there are some really good matchups in this West region. By the way, I think Northwestern does beat Boise State, because Northwestern at their best this year has been almost impossible to just find out about, let alone defend. But St. Mary's VCU is the 5-12 in here, and it's a very good matchup, and it has a lot of interesting little things. Now, outside of Gonzaga, the only mid-major to ever encompass 2 5 seeds or better in the NCAA tournament is St. Mary's. This is the first year. They were a 5 last year. They're a 5 again this year. So that's interesting. And yes, they have 7 losses only on the year, but 2 of them are to Gonzaga. And this St. Mary's team has had a huge run. They won 5 out of their last 7. And yes, the 77-51 game is a bad taste in everyone's mouth. But St. Mary's has showed this year that they can come back. They came back from a 10-point deficit late to beat Gonzaga at their home court. And again, St. Mary's has big guys. They have skill. They have senior leader. They have leadership. They have a very balanced attack. And that's going to be a very big thing. You have Aiden Mahaney, Alex Lucas, Mitchell Saxon. They have double figures. And then they have Logan Johnson, who didn't have a great game in that West Coast Conference tournament final, but they're the first team to lock down a top 5 seed in consecutive NCAA tournament to be considered a mid-major since St. Louis did the feat in 2013, 2014. VCU is an interesting opponent, not just because they come in with a 9-game winning streak, but the last time we saw VCU on a tournament stage, we didn't see VCU on a tournament stage because they were the team that caught COVID and had to forfeit their first round matchup against Oregon 2 years ago. Now VCU is back. They had an incredible second half against Dayton in the A10 tournament last weekend. They're 27-7. St. Mary's is 26-7. That's going to be a good game. UConn and Iona. UConn is a better team, and when you've seen UConn this year, they started the year 14-0. They, again, are the number 4 team in KenPom for a reason. And if you watch the Big East tournament in their game against Marquette, that was the best game of conference tournament weekend that did not involve St. John's. We'll talk about that in a second. But they went toe-to-toe with Marquette. They have played a tough schedule this year, have many good wins. In fact, I believe they've either lost to or beat Alabama. They beat Alabama early in the year in November. UConn at their best can really be really good, and it's finally time to see Mr. Dan Hurley get himself an NCAA tournament victory. But who's on the other sideline? Rick Pitino and Iona, who's already won himself an NCAA tournament game with Iona and many other teams. We'll talk about the Vampire in just a second, but Rick has just come back from the dead in so many different ways. And
wouldn't that make him a zombie?
Yeah, but he's a vampire. Let's just be fair. Iona has the player of the year in the back of Walter Clayton Jr. He has a 43% clip from the perimeter, and it is a guy who you will love to see. He averages 17 points a game. Combine that with the fact that those 2 winners are going to go up against each other, and honestly, that pod is really good and is really weird to be stuck in a place like Albany. By the way, another team that's going to get a home court advantage, even though they're the lower seed. Iona is going to get some people going up to Albany.
I don't know, Rabbi. New Rochelle to Albany. It's a little bit. New Rochelle to Albany
is closer than Stewart's to Albany. I will tell you right now. I'm taking both of those. It's a little bit of a
stretch, though.
So I think that's going to be very interesting, and I honestly would look for that UConn Iona winner to beat whoever wins against St. Mary's and VCU. I think it'll be UConn, but we can talk more about that in our predictions. The West is a wild, wild West for a reason.
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to move on to the final bracket. It would, I believe, be the lower left corner of your screen if we ever actually had graphics. Sorry about that. Finally, the East region, and I'll be at the regional in Madison Square Garden next week in the Mecca. All right, so we got Purdue, a 1 seed and the 4th overall number 1 seed. It's been a while since they've been a number 1 seed, back to the days of the big dog, Glenn Robinson, back in 1996. Now for Purdue to get back to their first Final Four in 43 years, they have some tough sledding ahead. You got 2 seed in Big East regular season and tournament champ Marquette, 3 seed Kansas State. The Big 12 is pretty heavy this year. 4 seed Tennessee and 5 seed Duke, one of the hottest teams in the nation. They all await. Oh yeah, and the 6 seed is also Kentucky, who has Oscar to be played. So Get ready for that one. That's a pretty damn tough. That's a pretty damn tough region too. Jay, the Boilermakers have a lot of good pieces and one piece that's 7'4", but
Yes.
the road to Houston ain't easy.
No, this is the region that I think is the most wide open, and the one where the number one seed is the most vulnerable. Purdue's chances pretty much start and end with that 7'4" behemoth known as Zach Edey, the Big Ten Player of the Year, and the second player in Big Ten history, first since 1964, to lead the league in scoring, 22.3, rebounding, 12.8, and field goal percentage, 60.6. The issue is that Purdue has only one other player averaging double figures in points per game, and that's freshman two guard Fletcher Lawyer at 10.9. And the only other player close is freshman point guard Braden Smith at 9.8, though both were in double figures in conference play. We all know that the old adage is that guards win in March, and Purdue's all-frosh backcourt has been inconsistent all season long. Lawyer shot just 36.6 from the floor, only 32.4 on his 5.1 threes per game. Smith shot it a bit better from the floor at 44.8, and a three from 38.9, but that was only on 2.8 attempts per game. Prior to their run to the Big Ten tournament title, the Boilermakers had committed turnovers on 18.5 of their possessions and made just 32% of their three-pointers per Bartovic.com since February 1 through the end of the regular season. Being that one-dimensional team, even as dominant as that dimension can be, makes for a tough path through this region. I like Florida Atlantic in the 8-9 game with Memphis, and I think FAU, another one of the Rabbi's 30-win teams and one of the best mid-major programs in the country, could give Purdue some trouble. I think Tennessee is overseeded as a number 4, especially with point guard Zachy Ziegler out for the year with a torn ACL. Tennessee has led the nation in defensive efficiency for most of the season, though recent subpar outings have dropped the Vols to number 2, due in large part to the loss of Ziegler. No, I mean, can't put it any plainer. He's the guy that makes this team go. So even if they get past number 13, Louisiana, which is not a given, I don't think they get past number 5, Duke, who, as long as they don't look past number 12, Oral Roberts, and their scoring machine of a guard, Max Abams, 22.2 per game, number 7 in the nation, and young teams can get caught looking ahead. Duke can be the team that derails Purdue, as they have arguably the best rim protector in the nation in freshman big man Derek Lively II, who averages 2.3 blocks per game and can absolutely, as long as he stays out of foul trouble, and it's a big caveat, he can neutralize Edey. Their other freshman big, Kyle Filipowski, the ACC Freshman of the Year, averaged 15.3 points per game, and his 8.9 boards and 16 double-doubles led all freshmen nationally. They also have a very solid backcourt in Jeremy Roche and Tyrese Proctor. Duke comes into the NCAAs on a 9-game winning streak, including their run to the ACC tournament title, making John Shire the third coach to win the ACC in his first year on the bench. Duke's defense has been key in this run. They holding opponents below their season scoring average 30 times this season, going 26-4. Blue Devils are second in the ACC in scoring defense, 64.4. Second in three-point defense at 30.6%, and second in field goal defense, 41.1. And during that winning streak, they knocked that down to 39.3. The bottom half of the region has the Big 12's third best team, as Rabbi noted. K-State is the 3. And the third best team from the SEC in number 6, Kentucky, who seems to be riding the ship at the right time behind returning National Player of the Year Oscar Tshiebwe, who once again averaged a double-double, 16.5 points, 13.1 boards. Illinois State transfer Antonio Reeves has become the Cats' most reliable perimeter scorer, 14.4 per game, 40.7 from 3. Jacob Toppin and his 12.5 points and 6.9 rebounds has given them the level of effort every night that you'd associate with his name. Yes, his brother is Knicks forward Obi Toppin. UK ranks 14th nationally in offensive efficiency, largely due to being number 2 in the nation in offensive rebounding percentage, grabbing almost 40% of their misses. But they only rank 71st in defensive efficiency and have struggled mightily with their pick-and-roll defense. Injuries have also killed them this season. Starting point guard Casey Wallace has dealt with back, knee, and ankle injuries and will be very much less than 100% coming into the NCAA tournament. His backup, Severe Wheeler, has missed a month with various issues, and his status is still TBD. And guard CJ Frederick is playing with cracked ribs and wearing a protective vest. All this is why I think that even if they get past Providence, they don't get past a K-State team led by point guard Marquise Norrell, a bona fide shot creator who averages 16.8 points per game and 7.6 assists, and small forward Keontae Johnson, who averages 17.7 points and 7 boards, along with a defense that holds opponents to a 47.5 effective field goal percentage and just 30% from beyond the arc. I like number 2 seed Marquette to come out of this half of the bracket. Shaka Smart's team rode a 6-game winning streak into the Big East tournament and then extended it to 10 en route to winning the conference tournament title. Marquette has a balanced scoring attack, 4 players in double figures, led by sophomore guard Cam Jones at 15 per game, and Big East Player of the Year point guard Tyler Kolek, who's one of the most dynamic passers in the game, ranking 2nd in the country with 7.7 assists and 4th in assist to turnover ratio at 3.1 to 1, all while averaging a little over 13 points per game on 48% from the floor and 39% from beyond 3. He quarterbacks a Golden Eagles offense that is 8th in adjusted offensive efficiency per KenPom, 9th in field goal percentage, 15th in points per game, and 2nd in fast break points. They struggle with interior defense, which could be an issue against a team like Duke or Purdue who have legit bigs, but they offset that by forcing more turnovers per possession than any team in the Big East. All of this has me going the long way around and to get to why I see either Duke or Marquette being the team who can block Purdue from coming out of the region. And if it's the Golden Eagles and they defend like they did this past weekend at MSG, they'll be heading to Houston after their 2nd straight weekend at the world's most famous arena.
2 out of 3. By the way, it'll be 2 out of 3. But this is another region where you could have a very good regional weekend because of the fact that you're going to have 4 teams that have legacies and a lot on the line, and that I'm very interested. By the way, Jay fell for it. It's Max Asmus.
Asmus. I pronounced his name the last time we talked about it.
Not phonetically. It's hard to phonetically say. By the way, speaking of, in the beginning, there was St. Peter's, but 2 years ago, there was another 15 seed that made it over, and Anthony Oral Roberts is back as a 12.
Yeah. By the way, is this just one of the stronger group of 12 seeds that we've seen? We got
yes.
I talked about one earlier. I talked about Oral Roberts, but shout out to Drake and VCU also to kind of round out the 12 seeds. Very strong group in itself. But Oral Roberts, obviously 2 years removed from that Cinderella run by I mean, you should help with this pronunciation. Max who?
Asmus.
Asmus, okay. I'm just gonna call him Mad Max, okay? Just to make it easier on myself. That's for sure. But yeah, they 2 years ago they pulled off the stunner by knocking off Ohio State, who was a 2 at the time, and then ended up beating the number 7 seeded Florida Gators to get to the Sweet 16. Now the veteran team led by Mad Max, averaging 22 a game. And he has help from seeing Big Man Connor Vanover. One of the taller players coming into the tournament at 7'3". But then you look at one of the biggest differences between that team and this team, besides the experience factor, is the fact that they're a lot better defensively. Last year was a bit of a struggle defensively. This year, they're 107 defensively, so the big turnaround. Offensive efficiency is at 22, at 23. But then you look at the defensive side of basketball. Vanover, extremely skilled offensive side of the ball. He shoots 33% from threes at 7'3". I mean, he's going to fit in perfectly fine if he gets to the NBA with the way the NBA plays nowadays with big shooting threes. But defensively, he anchors that defensive turnaround that went from 290 just a year ago to 105 defensive efficiency per KenPom. And then you look at the fact that the team shoots 56% on 2-point field goals, which is top 10 in the country. And they just has a award to draw possibly the hottest team going into the tournament in the Duke Blue Devils, who won their own great run through the ACC tournament. But the thing is, what scares you as far as picking Oral Roberts is the golden Eagles goose, the golden goose egg that they put up as far as quad one record. 0-4 So they do not have a quad one victory this season and still managed to get 30 wins. And here they go with arguably one of the more traditional blue bloods when it comes to March Madness. However, they do have the experience. That's the one factor they really have on Duke. Duke is a young team that you look at it, they caught fire, lightning in the bottle at the right time. And maybe Oral Roberts, it just may not be the greatest matchup when you think about they were the upstart team just 2 years ago. Going into the tournament with the deal in the headlights. Look, they've been there, they have the experience now, the more seasoned. They have Matt who's a great scorer. They have the bang. So it would be outside the realm that this would be a first round upset when you think of Oral Roberts just being the team that have the experience of 2 years ago to build on.
The only thing I will say about that 0-4 is when you are a low mid major, you don't get to host any of these games. So their 4 losses are to St. Mary's, Houston, Utah State, all teams that made the tournament, and New Mexico. And all of those games they have to play on the road. So you don't get favorable matchups. That's why that quad 1 record is 0-4. They've only lost once since November 27th. That is a pretty damn good team to see in there. Okay. I am going to pull an audible because I'm sick of talking about Duke all of today. So I'm actually going to pick a first round matchup. And it was referenced before. It's FAU and Memphis. And you can't think of a better matchup than this. In Ken Palm, Memphis is 19. FAU is 26. And net FAU is 13. Memphis is 23. We looked at the CAA this year, and we really just thought, or the American, we just thought Houston. Memphis just made the tournament for a second consecutive year under Penny Hardaway, one of my favorite coaches in all of basketball. And they have only lost 5 conference games, but 2 of those came into Houston, and 2 of them came in OT. And then they also lost a 7-point decision at Tulane. They beat them by 40, by the way, in the AAC semifinals. And they beat Auburn, they beat Texas A&M, they beat Houston, and a lot of the players on their team, they have 4 fifth-year players. Kendrick Davis, who went for 21 and 5 this year. DeAndre Williams, 17-9, 7-9. And then you have a bunch of guards of the name of Elijah McCadden and Alex Lomax. So Memphis, again, you don't really see a lot of them because they're in the American, but even though they did play against a shorthanded Houston team on Sunday, you saw the best of that team. And now you know why Memphis is going to be a tournament team for years to come, especially in the Penny Hardaway administration. But then, of course, we have Florida Atlantic, who are 31-3 this year and went 18-2 in Conference USA. There was one point when they went 11 weeks without a loss. They had 20 straight victories, dominated Conference USA. They went, here's the nice number for you, 23-0 against quad 3 and quad 4 opponents this year. Offensive and defensive efficiency, both 32nd to 36th respectively. They have a bunch of players also who took advantage of the COVID-19 year, so they're going to be around for a while. This is a very, very, very good team. And they are going to give whoever wins this game, I think, is going to give a real fight to Purdue. Memphis and FAU could be the best first round matchup out there. The Friday night late games, so weird things happen in that last window of the Thursday, Friday. Expect a classic here because I think Florida Atlantic and Memphis are both teams to look out for. All right. One thing left to do. Who's going to say hello, friends, to Reliance Stadium in Houston in the Final Four? I mean, Jim Nance has to call something on his way out the door. Well, not out the door. He'll still be doing that.
Rabbi, Anthony, have you guys fully read up on the connection that Nance has to the city and the university and why this is the one for those viewers who don't? Nance is a graduate of the University of Houston. He called basketball games for them there. He has, he has helped fund the golf program. He basically credits the city and the university with making him into the broadcaster that he is. And this
one
is
reason why he wanted to do it here.
right. And so it's not just, a chance to have his alma mater be at the Final Four. It's him coming home. And you know what? I was not fully aware of all of the depth of these ties. He was there in the years of Phi Slamma Jamma. He basically said he was one of the ones who came up with that nickname and calling Clyde Drexler Clyde the Glide and all that. But I did not realize how linked he really was to both the university and the city, and why this is so personal and will be so emotional for him. It's a hell of a send-off for him.
Yeah, and I'll also throw in for CBS. Actually hosting the pre and post game shows for Super Bowl 38 when they did that game in Reliance Stadium. Also, see back at the end of the 2003 season. So, this is actually I knew some of Nat's connections with the city of Houston, obviously Houston University, but this obviously being more in depth, that it makes sense that this would be his Final Four swan song, to say, as Rabbi said it.
All right, Anthony, who's going to the Final Four?
Oh boy, you know what? In the South, I got Alabama. I think all this considered, they're the team that's come out of that South bracket. The Midwest, I have Houston. The East and the West are the two that I was really going back and forth on the last couple of days. But for the West, I'm going with Gonzaga. I think the Bulldogs, the Drew team, is going to get one more crack at trying to get to the national championship game and win it, and finally winning it. In the East, you know what? I'm going to pull an audible. I'm going to Marquette. I just looked at it. I just think I produced journey to just get to the Elite Eight. It's been a very difficult choice. And also Marquette, it's hard for me to kind of bet against what Shaka Smart has done with that school and what we saw this past weekend, the Big East tournament. So those are my four teams: Alabama, Houston, Gonzaga, and Marquette.
Oh, interesting.
All right, Jay.
I pretty much gave you guys my reasons for my Final Four picks in my analysis of each region's quarter of the overall bracket. So I'm just going to give you the teams, which you should have already have figured out. In the South, I am going with Alabama. In the Midwest, I'm going with Texas. In the West, I am going with the Zags. And in the East, I am going with Marquette. And this is the first time in a very long time that I can remember only picking one number one seed to get to the Final Four.
I am also picking only one number one seed to get to the Final Four, but it's not Alabama. I'm picking Arizona to come out of the South region.
Arizona's a 2 seed.
Yeah, I said, but I'm getting to my number one seed.
Okay. Didn't follow
Arizona, I think, has had a good run for the last few years, and I do think their path is a little bit easier than Alabama's path. And I think overall, if Arizona is semi-healthy at the end, I think they're going to overcome the turmoil that has been going on with Alabama this year. I have the one seed that I have is Houston, by the way, because I think Marcus Sasser is going to be back. I think he was kept off as a precaution. You can keep him off really for the Northern Kentucky game. And honestly, Iowa and Auburn are both teams that they can also beat with or without Sasser. Maybe they do need him a little bit. But once you get to the Kansas City regional, I just like their matchup. I think Texas and Houston's going to be a dogfight. I do think those two teams end up in that spot, and I think Houston's just going to muck out a win.
Okay.
I have UConn coming out of the West. I will tell you, I had it very, very close to being Gonzaga, but I'm not going to follow the sheep in this group over here.
No, you're just going to be a homer and pick one of your favorite teams.
No, because I'm going to pick them because they started the season 14-0. They've played as good as any other team this year in the country. And I think overall, UConn is just a very, very talented team from top to bottom. So And also because you two picked Gonzaga, so because I am, you know what? I'm going to pull. I'm not going to pull an audible. I would say I sung Marquette's praises last week. I'm going to continue singing Marquette's praises this week. They're a team that is scrappy. They're a team that is coached by a guy who's been to a Final Four before in Shaka Smart. It was a very big reclamation project this year for Marquette, and I think the Big East is the best conference, top 4 in the entire country. So how will it be to see 2 of those teams in the Final Four in Houston? So my Final Four is Arizona.
Hold on. If that happens, would that be the first time since the Big East sent 2 teams to the Final Four since Georgetown and Villanova in 1985?
I'll take a look. It's probably been after that, but Arizona, Marquette, Houston, and UConn are my Final 4. So, and if that's the case, I kind of do like Houston to cut down the nets, but we'll get to that point when we get to it. All right. Finally tonight, there was some more coaching shuffling out of the state of New York, but we're actually going to be in the New York that we know, as Mike Anderson, formerly of St. John's, didn't really get the same choice that Jim Boeheim got. No retirement speech that he apparently said on Saturday that nobody caught. Mike Anderson was gone a day after losing to Marquette in the quarterfinals of the Big East tournament. No NCAA appearances, a 68-56 record, and not even touching the record of predecessor Chris Mullen meant the writing was kind of on the Queen's wall. Rick Pitino, as we currently mentioned, is back from the dead locally with Iona and is mentioned as the lead candidate to replace him, although Georgetown wants him to. Going to be a very interesting battle for a guy who has no morals whatsoever, but that's another point for another time. Jay, what's the future in Queens, and is this the right move, ditching Anderson and going after someone bigger?
Yeah, as I said to the rabbi on text, I'm not really surprised by this. Both Anderson getting fired and Pitino being linked to the job. The Athletic's Seth Davis wrote that he expects Pitino to make the move from New Rochelle to Jamaica Estates 48 hours after Iona gets bounced from the NCAA tournament. I've always felt that the St. John's head coach needs to have New York City ties, and Anderson doesn't. I've never been a big Pitino fan, but the school is at the point now where they feel they need to make a big swing on the position for the program to return it to being New York's college basketball team. And this has kind of been St. John's pattern. They follow a big swing, Mullen, as you said, with a medium swing. And if that medium swing, Anderson, doesn't work out, they react by taking another big swing, and in this case, Pitino. Look, Pitino's off-court history will continue to follow him no matter how far into the past it recedes. Due to the age of media that we live in, both mainstream and social, whether it should or not. And I think at this point, it shouldn't really be a thing since the FBI exonerated him for what went down at Louisville all those years ago. And by all reports, he's run a clean program at Iona. But that being said, as Rabbi noted, I think the other reason St. John's is rumored to be going hard after him is there are rumblings out of DC that Georgetown is interested in him as well. And St. John's just can't lose a high-profile head coaching hire to their longtime bitter rival, right? Look, Mike Anderson is a good person and a good coach, and you can say that maybe St. John's gave up on him too soon, but he was never really the right fit, and he never quite got the team to where the school wants the program to be, which is A, back to being an annual participant in the NCAA tournament, and 2, back to being the beast of the Big East and New York's college basketball school like it was during the glory days of the Big East, when legendary high-profile coaches like St. John's own Lou Carnesecco, talk about a legacy to try and live up to with this program. Hell, the on-campus arena bears his name. John Thompson at Georgetown, Raleigh Massimino at Villanova, and as we talked about at the top of the show, Jim Boeheim at Syracuse. When these guys, these legends of the game, stalked the sidelines, and the conference was the badass of college basketball. Look, the pool of active coaches that even remotely fit that bill is small. You got Bill Self, you got John Calipari, you got Tom Izzo, and maybe a few select others. And it's smaller now by one, now that Boeheim is retired. Look, Pitino has the rep in the resume, 834 and 292 career record. It's a 74% win percentage, 8 seasons with 30-plus wins, 12 regular season conference titles, 14 conference tournament titles, and at least one the other or both at 4 of his 6 coaching stops. 23 trips to the NCAAs, 54 and 20 when he gets there. That's 73% winning percentage, 7 Final Fours, 2 national championships, Kentucky in 96, Louisville in 2013, and he's already tied into the New York high school recruiting scene from his last 3 years at Iona. All these are requirements, in my opinion, requirements to be the head coach of St. John's. So I can't fault the school for going after him. And if he takes the job, I think the school, the program, the fans, and alumni like me, as well as the entire city itself, can be cautiously optimistic about the future of college basketball's primary tenant of Madison Square Garden, an arena that Pitino is very familiar with from his stint as the head coach of the NBA team that plays there.
Don't remind me about that era. Jesus Christ, how dare
It's
you?
going to come up.
Dare you, Anthony?
Hey, hold on now. I used to love those old bomb squad teams, the Nick teams that Rick Pitino coached. Okay, come on now. Mark Jackson, Joe Wilkins, Johnny Newman. I the post.
Listen, Bernard King ain't walking through that door. Larry Bird ain't walking through that door. So
yeah, and Jay, another name a coach I would throw out there as far as St. John's Law, somebody that I grew up, I was kind of endeared to, was Mike Jarvis as well. I mean,
No, I mean, do not even get me started on Jarvis. Anthony, you and I are on opposite ends of that divide. I have nothing but hate and vitriol for that man. I'm sorry. He freaking ruined that team while he was there. Sorry.
Okay. Well, obviously, with Pitino is kind of is the main guy on St. John's radar, but a guy that I was talking to Rabbi about before the show, he was watching the NIT tournament earlier with Speedy Klassen. Like, his name got thrown out there as far as coaching candidates for St. John's. Like, granted, he has no medium swing
they take if and when Pitino fails.
Yeah, granted, he has absolutely no connection to St. John's whatsoever. But you see what he's done with our alma mater, Hofstra University.
Yeah.
2 years, 220+ seasons. Earlier tonight, upset winning the NIT tournament against the 1-seed record Scarlet Knights. Last year he's done a great job in his 2 seasons, and obviously he's a local because he's a local native, and that is one of the, and as you say, Jay, that is one of the criteria that I think St. John's is looking for, someone who has the familiarity of not just playing and coaching in the city of New York, being able to deal with the media, being able to deal with the high pressure things that not just playing in St. John's. Coaching in St. John's, but also the Mecca, Madison Square Garden, the Big East Conference. You know what the tradition is all about with that. And also, you mentioned that Pitino is on Georgetown's radar. They fired Patrick Ewing just a few days ago, also after that didn't work out. So we got 2 traditional Big East powerhouses that we basically grew up on as basically being Monday Night Basketball at Madison Square Garden, now looking to kind of right the ship with some kind of a coaching change. But Klass's name being out there is very interesting. I mean, because you think about the lack of coaching experience. He's only 2 years into his coaching regime at Hofstra. You think of Chris Mullen. I mean, he had no prior coaching experience.
No, and honestly, Anthony, I don't think Mullen, I think, was fine. I said this to Rabbi. Mullen, I think, was fine on game day. Mullen just didn't want to deal with everything else associated with being a college basketball head coach, especially at his alma mater, especially since he played for Louis.
Kind of like the reverse at Orgeron, someone who knew how to recruit but not how to coach. This is the other way around.
Yep.
I think, by the way, Speedy did sign a contract extension with Hofstra for whatever that means for 2 years. So he's still got a little bit of work to do. And yes, Jay, even though he is one of the only one other second-year head coach on 20+ wins this year, that's Tommy Lloyd of Arizona, he would be a medium hire. I think Pitino would be a good hire for St. John's, and yes, his pass is going to follow him because, as mentioned, the man has been a subject of several NCAA investigations, but this was in the pre-NIL era. The NIL era has changed the game a little bit, and as other people have gotten immoral, we're now all on record. While some people have said that other coaches are immoral, the NCAA has met them halfway on that, and I think that's going to help Pitino a lot. I think the Big East can still be just a very weird conference year in, year out. Marquette wasn't anywhere near this good of a team last year. Xavier wasn't anywhere near this good of a team last year. And UConn they were a 5 seed last year, but they haven't won a tournament game in a while. They haven't done anything under Hurley yet.
No,
So
and you either have Seton Hall or Providence. The other two remain.
and
you
Seton
know,
Hall, Providence has had a
18.
lot. Providence is a different story. They have had started to gain tournament bids on tournament bids, but they still have a little bit to go. At Seton Hall, just got into the first year of their new head coach, the guy from St. Peter's of last year, Shaheen Holloway. So I think there's a lot of interesting factors going in. Pitino would instantly help the recruiting of that area. I would like to see how Pitino would do with the transfer portal, how Pitino would do with this NIL era, because he hasn't really coached at that time. Iona, you're still going to get some players, but you're going to get them more homegrown. You will get some players on the transfer portal, but you're not going to get the same thing being in a one bid school. But this was the Rick Pitino redemption tour, and he has run a very clean program so far in Iona, and they already have an NCAA tournament victory. Again, I don't like the morals of the man, and I don't think I agree. Mike Anderson needed to go. He just did not fit the system of St. John's. But big swing, little swing, medium swing. By the way, wouldn't it be funny if he ended up going to Texas Tech after all of this and going to the conference that actually has has a higher basketball future, considering which will gain Houston and Gonzaga next year. So whatever. I think it's going to be a very interesting war because Georgetown has had very little history for a long time. So is St. John's, but I do think St. John's does have a history of still being at the mediocre line. Georgetown had a 18-game had a big-time Big East losing streak going into this year, and were worse than DePaul. And it's very hard to be worse than DePaul in a Big East regular season. But I'm very curious to see what happens with Pitino. I think the one guarantee is for certain we're not going to see him at Iona next year. Probably not. We're going to see him probably coach his 6th team into the NCAA tournament. It's astounding. All right. That's it.
Yeah.
For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I am completely exasperated, as you might have heard many times during my talking tonight. Stephen Rabinowitz. We're on Facebook Live, facebook.com/onthesportslines. We're on YouTube Archive, youtube.com/onthesportslines. And Jay?
Our Twitter handle is ONTH Sportslines, where you will find a link to this show tomorrow at some point, and other interesting tidbits of sports-related information we think are worth your time. I put up an article last week, still up there. Jason Stark's latest piece on the initial effect of the new Major League Baseball rules. Jason has been going around spring training exhibition games, and he kind of gave us a little bit of a rundown what he's seen. And I'm telling you, it's been a little bit better than we initially thought. So, but we'll see. I'm sure something from these rules will dot his weird and wild columns throughout the baseball season.
Guys, it's the most wonderful time of the year.
Yes,
Baseball
it is.
is about to start opening day.
I still have a few. I still have my brackets, so I'm gonna get started on that as soon as we're off the air. So I got work to do tonight.
Me too.
Make sure you give us both tips. All right. We'll see you next time on the Sports Lines. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.